I'm going to move down, and I will leave you up. Or do you need help handing things out like you did?
No, I've got Aaron.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to come and talk about one of my favorite subjects. I'm doing a little differently this year in that we're going to talk about things in general. So first of all, I want to tell you about some of the things that the Native Americans have brought to us. For instance, food. 60% of all the food eaten in the world came from the Native Americans. Now that's North and South America. The government that we have, republic, democracy, democracy, republic, came from the Native Americans. The idea that one person has one vote and everybody has that vote was not something they did in Europe. That came from here, the Iroquois Confederacy, which is found out east in, mostly in New York. So that's pretty important, our own government. The other thing are medicines. You don't think about medicines as coming from Native Americans, but they gave us things like quinine, aspirin, painkillers, antibacterial medicines, and many, many more. And I know for sure from a former teacher, Gray Aubrick, that two people back here know who is, that sometimes a medicine for Native Americans was 14 different ingredients. So that's a lot for them to figure it out. We always think of them as primitive people, but they weren't. They used what was in nature and around them and used it to make their lives better. So I want you to now look at that handout that came with your bulletin today, because we're going to talk about the different cultural regions. Now, each cultural region all use the same things, the same things for homes, or the same foods. They dress the same. Their languages were different. So I just talked about the Iroquois Confederacy. Look on your map and you'll see the Northeast is basically things from east of the Mississippi and north of Tennessee and goes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. We are included in that. So the Native Americans from Michigan, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and the Ojibwa are included in the Northeast. Right below that is the Southeast, which are Cherokee, Chickasaw, and I'm going to talk about Seminoles, which came from Florida. The next one to the left is the Plains, and that started way up at the edge of Canada, and it was the Dakotas and the Montana, and goes right straight down to the Gulf of Mexico. And these people all lived similar ways. And to the bottom is the Southwest. These people were desert people. The Apaches, the Navajo, the Zuni, the Hopi, all of those lived in there, and that's like New Mexico and Arizona. Above that is one we don't hear much about, the Great Basin. The Shoshone, the Paiute, the Utes, there's a very famous Indian chief that came from there, though, Chief Joseph. I'm sure you've heard about him and his trail to get out of the United States, and I think he came within 40 miles after leading our army for thousands of miles. So he's pretty important. California has its own designation, and then right above the Great Basin in California is the Northwest Coast, and I'm going to be talking a lot about that. In America, in the United States, that includes Idaho and Washington, and then goes right up the coast and includes Alaska. So kind of keep in mind, maybe keep this in front of you, because I will try to tell you what cultural area we're talking about. And first, I'm going to show you some baskets, and Mary's going to help, and we're going to pass them around. And the first one, let's do southeast, Mary. If you've ever been to Florida and seen their big, wonderful pine trees and the pine needles that are so long, they wove them into baskets. You can pass those around. The next, from here, the northeast, are made from a tree, the black ash. They cut it down, pounded on it, and put it into strips and wove it into a basket. The next is the southwest. These are made with yucca fibers where they cut them, and I think there's a group of weeds or something, and then they're wrapped with the yucca plant. And the last two come from the northeast. Cedar bark cut into narrow strips. Northwest coast, I should have said, excuse me. This is northwest coast. Cedar strips woven into a basket. Oh, yeah, she's ready for me with the homes. I had only 4 examples, but we found some pictures. Up on the screen is an igloo, and that comes from the Arctic or the subarctic. Those are blocks of snow piled up, and the little entrance is so it kind of keeps the cold air from getting in where the family lives. Next one. The Hogan. The Hogan is Navajo, southwest. They lived in the desert. They had a few trees that they could use to make the form, but then it was adobe, which is weed, straw, and mud mixed together. Now, if you were a Navajo, this house is going to face east, as all Native American houses always face to the east, because why? The sun. The sun would come in and light their home. And you would, if you were a man, you would walk in that door, and you would walk in a circular motion all the way around the fire in the center, and you would sit down at the left-hand side. Children and women, we would go in and sit on the right-hand side. And that's just their culture. Now, there'd be a fire in the middle. As with all of these, except for the igloo, they didn't have a fire inside. They just had an oil lamp. But there'd be a fire in the middle, and that would go out the smoke hole. All right, Jazzy, next one. Northeast. This is the Iroquois Confederacy out in New York. They lived in longhouses. Now, many families would live in here, and if you can see at the top, there's some black spots. Every one of those is a hole opening up so that family's fire could raise up and go out that hole. It's made into a dome shape with tree saplings tied together with bark, and then they put birch bark over the top. Now, why did they use birch bark? It's waterproof. It's the only bark that is waterproof. So you don't want to get wet when it rains, so you put waterproof on top of it. The next one is the Northwest Coast, and I love this because it's so bright with all the colors, and right in the middle where the doorway is, you're walking through a totem pole to get into this home, and it would be long, like the longhouse from out east, made out of cedar and carved. And we're going to learn that totem poles told about the family that lived there. It would tell their family name, their clan, and their tribe, and something about them. So, thank you. I think that's the last one, is it? Oh no, here we go. Florida. The Seminoles lived in chickies. Chickie is a home that is raised up because it's so wet in Florida. So they had a floor that was up 2-3 feet, and it's covered with brush, weeds, or whatever. And you can see on the one to the left, they've used some big branches so to make sure that that holds it down. And that roof is very thick because what's it going to do a lot in Florida? Rain. But it's open on the sides and on the ends because it's hot down there. Okay, next one is a Pueblo. This happens to be the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico. Taos, there are 2 of these facing each other across a small river. Now, this has been lived in for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's made out of adobe, which again is weeds, straw-like stuff, and mud, and they would make it into bricks, let them dry, and then build it up. You can see they call them vegas, across the top where the roof would be, the ceiling, and that's holding up the ceiling. They were logs that were put there, and then they would put them across and make it solid enough that you could walk on that. There are no stairways. If you want to go up to the 2nd and 3rd floor, you had a ladder. Everything was on the outside. So, very interesting. The last one, I think, is a teepee. Now, this is from the Plains Indians, those that go right down the middle of west of the Mississippi. Those poles are about yay big around. Now, try to imagine to drag those through a place like Michigan, where you got all the trees. It's not going to work. So this only works for the Plains Indians because there wasn't a lot of big trees and things. And I have seen a teepee put up in 15 minutes. So if you know what you're doing, you can do it pretty darn fast. They would decorate it with images that were important to them. It might be their family, their clan, or something important that they had done. And around the bottom, there's a double thickness of the buffalo hide. And it comes up 3 or 4 feet, and in the wintertime, they stuff that with grasses for insulation, make it warmer in there. In the summertime, they'd roll up the bottom so that cool air would come in and it wouldn't be so hot in there. But, of course, there's a fire in the middle, and it goes out through the top. And here, too, just like in one of the other homes I told you, you go in and you walk around the fire. You had a specific place to sit. That way, the kids didn't argue about who was supposed to sit where. So, good idea. Okay, and this one is a wickiup. It's from the Southwest, way down where the Apaches are. The Apaches built this. They would have some kind of small tree that they would build a framework and then put all these weeds over the top. Now, it can't be moved, and I didn't tell you. The teepee can be moved easily. And if they can take it down and put it up in 15 minutes, we can't pack the car in that amount of time, can we? So they were pretty good at that. So this was a permanent home, as were all the others. Right here in Michigan, the Northeast cultural area, they used wigwams. It was made with saplings bent over, tied together with bark, and then again, they put birch bark on top of it. Oh, and that's the last one. So, a little bit about the homes. The next thing I'm going to do is tell you a Native American legend. Now, it might be true, what goes on in the story, and it might not be true, but you're supposed to learn some things from that. You're supposed to learn how to be a good person, how to be a good member of that tribe, or teach you what goes on in nature that you need to know. And each village would have someone like this, a storyteller. She's got kids all over her. That was to signify that they were a storyteller. They'd be 2 or 3 of them, and it was their job to be the teachers of that group of Native Americans. So they had to remember everything. And they were the ones that taught the children. The legend I'm going to talk to you about today, Whale in the Sky, comes from the northwest coast. That is Washington, Idaho, and all the way up to Alaska. So it should be up there on there. I'm going to read it, but it will be, you can't read it because it's not big enough, is it? Long ago, the rivers and the sea were filled with fish, and tall trees crowded the mountainsides. There was no written language among the Indian tribes of the Northwest, and storytellers passed history and legends from one generation to the next. Sometimes a chief would hire an artist to carve a story in pictures on the trunk of a giant tree. Whale in the Sky is such a tale. The carved tree, called a totem pole, identified the chief, his family, his clan, and his tribe. And here's the story. In a time long ago, Thunderbird watched over the sea and land and all its creatures. And in a lot of the western tribes, the Thunderbird was called the Great Spirit, and they thought he could do all kinds of wonderful things. One day he saw a whale, small on the horizon of the sea. He did not see Frog, small on the bank of the river. And you can't see Frog either because it didn't fit. He's way down in the right-hand corner on the bank of a river. And he looks scared. Frog trembled because Whale was growing larger. The salmon swam faster and faster as Whale chased them through the sea and into the river. Whale chased the salmon up the river, and Frog was afraid. He called to Raven. Raven flew into the sky after Thunderbird. Whale swallows the salmon and chases them into the river, he called. Thunderbird stretched his wide wings and flew like the wind. He saw Whale in the river. And what's Whale doing? Eating the salmon. And there, you can't see Frog's up in the left-hand corner now. He still looks afraid. Thunderbird grabbed Whale in his terrible talons and flew high into the sky. Whale struggled and screamed. Thunderbird flew higher and higher. Then he dropped Whale on the highest mountain. Frog was safe. He thanked his friend Raven. Now there were salmon for the people who lived beside the river. And you see Whale is still up there on that mountain. Whale gasped and shivered on the mountain. He promised to stay out of the river if he could return to the sea. So Thunderbird clapped his great wings, and Whale slid down the mountain back into the sea. The chief of the people, told this tale to the carver, and the carver made his story into a totem pole. Thunderbird holds Whale while Raven watches over salmon and Frog. Okay, the end. You can leave that one up there, please. What were kids supposed to learn from this story? You have to give me the answers. Is it true? Can Thunderbird do those things? No. Pardon me? They They have to take care of their resources. And what's one thing that's being abused of their resource? The fish are being eaten by the whale. Now, where does a whale belong? What kind of water? Salt water. There is not salt water in the river. Who's being deprived of the fish? The people. They couldn't be fed as easily because the whale was eating all the fish. How about the children who probably like to swim and play in the river? Would they feel safe with a whale going up and down the river? I don't think so. And somebody at Byron brought up a real good thing that I can tell you, kindergartners and first graders didn't think of this. There's forgiveness. The whale was forgiven and was allowed to come back into the ocean. So, this story isn't true. I mean, a whale can't survive on top of a mountain and slide back down. There's no such thing as a thunderbird big enough to haul him up there. But it is true that people need fish. Whales need salt water. And that's what you're supposed to learn. And those are the kinds of stories, legends, that are told by a storyteller so children can learn how to live in their environment and how to be a good person. So maybe another thing they would learn is don't take what belongs to someone else, like the whale was taking what didn't belong to him. There are plenty of fish in the ocean. He did not need to take them out of the river. Anything else you can think of? Okay, you have been taught Native American stuff today.
I told her earlier it's the best sermon we've had all year. It was very interesting, informative, and enjoyable. And I should have mentioned earlier, those who would wish to donate to our Native American ministries, all you have to do is get an envelope from the back and write on there and put it in. Anytime, we'll take it and make sure it gets where it goes. What a blessing. Let us stand, shake ourselves out, and let us sing about my Father's world. What a perfect song to be singing. going to invite you to sit down. I like it if you need to get up and down a lot. Keeps your blood flowing. It's good for you, right? And I'm going to ask if you will join me in our pastoral prayer, please. Oh, great Spirit, whose voice, what's the matter? Okay, never mind. Whose voice that we hear and whose breath gives life to everyone, hear me. We come to you as one of your many children. We are weak, we are small. We need your wisdom and your strength. Let us walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunsets. Make our hands respect the things you have made, and make our ears sharp so we may hear your voice. Make us wise so that we may understand that you have taught our people and the lessons that you have hidden in each leaf and rock. We ask for wisdom and strength, not to be superior to our fellow people, but to be able to fight our greatest enemy, ourselves. Make us ever ready to come before you with clean hands and a straight eye, so as life fades away, as a fading sunset, that our spirit comes to you without shame. Amen. Amen. Let us lift our voices in the Lord's Prayer and song this morning. Amen. We come to a time where we give back to the Lord our gifts. And at this point in time, I'm going to have you stand again. Let's sing the Gloria Patri. We give thanks, O Lord, for all the things that you have given us and done for us. Please accept these our gifts today, that they might further your kingdom on earth. Amen. Let's sing our closing hymn. It's Let All the World in Every Corner Sing. I would advise that you do not use the hymnal on this one. We're using a little bit older version, and it's way easier to follow. each other. And let us bless each other. May the stars carry your sadness away. May the flowers fill your heart with beauty. May hope forever wipe away your tears. And above all, may silence make you strong. Amen.